Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. I just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers won 123-103 over the Toronto Raptors, sweeping the season series and improving to 6-4 at the 10-game mark of the season. That is a 60% win percentage for LA. They did not come out unscathed. Anthony Davis suffered a eye injury about midway point of the third quarter. Jakob Poeltl is trying to dunk the ball. AD's rotating over and blocks the shot with his left hand. But with Poeltl's offhand, his left hand, he strikes AD in the face, and AD falls to the ground, is holding his face, writhing in pain, and is on the ground for about a couple minutes before he's helped up by the Lakers medical staff, the training staff, and they help him back to the locker room where he does not return to the game. So we will touch on that with one of our takeaways. But before we get started, as always, for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening in the morning on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. See you all starting to populate the chat. As Concerned Citizen said, Chet out at least 8 to 10 weeks is huge. Sucks for the big guy. Yes, it is very unfortunate for OKC. They're my pick to win, the number one seed in the West, win 60+ games. But with Chet Holmgren, out now for the next 8 to 10 weeks at a minimum. Sometimes these injuries can take a bit longer to come back with when you're talking about the hip. And then Isaiah Hartenstein is still out for them. That's two big blows for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So potentially have to recalibrate their expectations, at least in the short term. I think if Chet is able to come back 100%, they will be fine. They're still, in my opinion, the best team in the West and the team that everyone's got to go through. But we shall see. That's why you play the game. It comes down to health and luck and all these different factors. But so speaking of the Lakers, though, let's get back on track here. So the Lakers win 123-103. And this was a game that was at times very unserious. Unfortunately for the Lakers, a brand of basketball that they will occasionally play when they are playing a team that is not quite up to their level. We'll say, like, as an aside, this Toronto team has been very fun. They're 2-9 on the season, but they're in basically every game. They've been without Scotty Barnes, their best player. Emmanuel Quickley has missed a bunch of time, and they've been just pesky and feisty and competitive. And they gave the Lakers a run for their money in the first 30 minutes or so of this game before LA just flipped the switch. So Lakers are down double digits, early in this game, late first quarter into early second quarter. And they make a little bit of a run to close the first half. And then it's kind of a back and forth game. And then from the point that AD goes down, they're down by 3 points. And they go on to outscore the Raptors 53-30 the rest of the game over the final 17-16 of the game. So LA, I have it here, second half stats. They outscored Toronto 40-16 in terms of paint points. They outscored them 8-3 in terms of fast break points, and they had 7 offensive rebounds to their 3 offensive rebounds. So LA shot, they were getting killed at one point early in the third quarter. I tweeted it out. They had been out rebounded 30-12 by the Raptors, which was just inexcusable. Almost 3 times as many rebounds, and that's a potential of 18 possessions going in Toronto's favor. Obviously, some of those are going to be offensive rebounds, and there was multiple possessions with multiple offensive rebounds. So technically, it wasn't like they had all these extra possessions because of it was happening a lot in clusters, I guess I would say. But still, Toronto, Jakob Poeltl was out muscling just about, including AD, just about everybody in the paint. And he had 4 offensive rebounds, but their guards were coming in and making plays, and they have a lot of athletic, strong guards who were able to leverage those advantages physically against the Lakers perimeter guys. But LA really clamped down in the second half again, and I think with AD going out, in a way, obviously his health comes first, and that's the most important thing with this. And if he misses time or has to just miss an extended stretch for depending on how severe his eye injury is, he left the arena before we entered the locker room, and he did not speak with reporters after the game. Obviously, that's the most important thing, but it felt like that lit a spark under this group in terms of LeBron stepping it up. I think he had been kind of going through the motions a bit through the first 2.5 quarters. Jackson Hayes had a great close to this game, blocking shots, grabbing offensive rebounds, getting to the free throw line, finishing lob dunks from LeBron. Austin Reaves had a monster second half. Cam Reddish made some big plays. D'Lo had a quiet second half, but made that big 3 to close the first half, the buzzer beater, and kept them afloat because they had a rough first half. It was just 80 and D'Lo in double figures. So D'Lo helped them more early. But yeah, I mean, this was a group effort. Everyone helped defensively. Cam, I think, continues to really impress. This was his best offensive game of the season, in my opinion. I know he had 15 against Memphis, but that was a weird game. This was like the more normal rotation, and he 5 of 7 shooting, 1 for 3 on threes, a couple rebounds and assists, the steal, and really did a nice job against their perimeter guys. But yeah, so let's get into the 3 takeaways from tonight's game. Takeaway number 1 for me is going to be Anthony Davis's eye injury, and we don't yet know the status of Anthony Davis in terms of what is the actual injury. JJ Redick just said that he knows AD couldn't see after the game and that he suffered some trauma to the eye. And I don't know if that's just like the medical term instead of poked in the eye or struck in the eye or whatever. But obviously, this is now an injury that AD has had multiple times dating back to last season. He suffered an eye injury against the Warriors on March 16th. Then he also suffered an eye injury against the Timberwolves on April 7th. So the original one was a left corneal abrasion. Basically, his eyeball got scratched, and then it got re-aggravated in that second game. And so after the first game, he didn't miss any time, but after the second game, he did miss the following game. So there's a chance here that Anthony Davis ends up missing Wednesday's game against the Grizzlies. Now, I will say it's good for the Lakers that they have 2 days off. They'll be off tomorrow, then they will practice on Tuesday. So maybe AD, that having 2 days off is enough. He can just rest at home, be in like a dark room, and just let his eye heal, sleep, rest, recover, and he's ready to go on Wednesday. But it was obviously not a good sign that he did not return to this game. He didn't even return to the bench, and that he went straight home from the arena. So that's and now again, this has become a trend with him getting poked in the eye, specifically the left eye. The previous injuries were to the left eye as well. AD grew up. We've all seen the famous photos of him as like a middle school, high schooler with the scrawny, undersized AD with the goggles and the shaved head. He grew up wearing goggles, and since then he's refused to wear them. And even going back to last year, even though he consulted with eye doctors, they said he would be fine if he didn't. They recommended he wear it, but they said ultimately like it wasn't a mandatory thing, and he chose not to. So he's been anti-goggle, looking like Kareem or James Worthy out there. But I wonder if this changes that, because as I get it. Aesthetically, it's not the best look, and I think it has an association with the 70s and 80s and the previous, even 90s with Horace Grant, and like there's been guys who have done it, but it really hasn't been a thing for like almost 20 years. And I get why AD wouldn't want to do it from an aesthetic perspective, but at this point, he's been hit in that same eye so many times that he's always around the rim, he's always in the paint, and that's where these things are happening on collisions, fouls, blocking shots, rebounds, etc. So like this is gonna happen. again, probably. And I think it would be best if he wore goggles moving forward. So we'll see if this, maybe this changes, like the eye doctors, now that it's happened a third time, can say, hey, look, like, you have another corneal abrasion potentially, and now you probably should wear goggles moving forward. So, well, I don't know. I mean, again, I think if I had to guess, he's probably going to try not to, but maybe it becomes a mandatory thing, and maybe this ends up being a blessing in disguise that he now has his eyes protected, and this isn't going to be an issue moving forward necessarily, unless it's like he gets an inadvertent elbow and then it like cracks the goggle or whatever. But those things are pretty sturdy. So that's really, to me, like the biggest thing. I always try and look at the big picture with these takeaways, and AD's health. Like, he's already battling this plantar fasciitis in his left foot, and he looked fine. He had 22 points in 26 minutes. He was well on his way to getting, having another 30-point night, but it got to the free throw line a bunch. Like, he was looking good out there, outside of Jakob Poeltl at times kind of pushing him around and out muscling him. The refs were not really calling fouls in the first half, and then it started to trickle in the second half. But yeah, I mean, AD's health is the big thing here, right? So that's going to be the thing to monitor in terms of tomorrow. We probably won't get an update, but Tuesday there's practice, injury report for Wednesday, and then we'll have a better idea of where AD's at. Takeaway number 2 for me is going to be Austin Reaves has been the biggest beneficiary of Cam Reddish entering the starting lineup. So this is now back-to-back games with 20 plus points and 6 plus assists for Austin Reaves. Tonight, he was the Lakers' leading scorer with 27 points and 6 assists. Did so on 10 of 17 shooting, hit 3 threes, 4 for 5 from the free throw line. So to me, Austin has really been the guy who has benefited from Cam taking on those primary defensive assignments, and not quite saving Austin's legs, because he's still like, every team has multiple guard scorers. So Cam can't guard everybody, and Austin is still getting matched up with Grady Dick or Emmanuel Quickly, or this is maybe not the best example of quality perimeter scores, but I think it. And look, the competition in the last couple of games, it's been Philly without Maxey and Embiid. It's been Toronto, who's one of the worst teams in the league, also without Scotty Barnes. So like, certainly, I think we have to grade on a little bit of a curve here and acknowledge the opponent and the context of the situation. But Cam Reddish taking on those assignments, I think, has really saved Austin's energy and his legs. He also said that before the last game against the Sixers, after the Lakers had come back from their road trip, JJ Redick pulled him aside and showed him some clips defensively where he felt Austin had slipped on the road trip. And he even said so post game, that he was like, Austin's one of those guys that I can always count on. Like, I really trust him to show up every night and to play hard and to compete on both sides of the ball. And I felt like there was some slippage on the road trip. So he said he had a conversation with Austin. Then Austin told us that he and JJ went over some film, and he was like, I couldn't even come up with excuses, because he's showing me the film, and like, I can't deny that on this possession or this possession I'm taking it off. So I think Austin's been committed again defensively after some slippage on the road trip, but I also think offensively it's really just simplified things of Cam is such a low usage player as well, that and Rui's been struggling offensively, which at some point I think is its own conversation. But with Rui, I think taking a step back offensively, Cam being a much lower usage guy than D'Lo, and then the Lakers still trying to stagger D'Lo and Austin a bit. I think Austin's been the biggest beneficiary, from an offensive perspective. And tonight he got going in the second half, got to the rim several times, got to the free throw line several times. So it was hitting his threes. So I think Austin has been playing really well the last couple of games. And I think that in part, again, has been the Cam starting adjustment, moving D'Lo to the bench. I also think D'Lo has played well. I think the defense has not been great the last couple of games, but 15 points, 6 of 13 shooting, 3 of 9 on threes, two rebounds, 1 assist. So he has become much more offensive minded in terms of looking for his shot rather than passing. He's, I want to say his assist total the last 2 games is like 3, maybe 4. So D'Lo has become much more of a scorer off the bench, but I think that's what the Lakers intended, and that's what they've really wanted with him. So he's been doing that. But I mean, I think you've also seen LeBron with D'Lo out of the starting lineup. He's had to take on more of a playmaking role as well. So LeBron tonight, 19 points, 10 rebounds, 16 assists, triple-double, second straight triple-double. And he really turned it on in the second half with the rebounding, with the energy, with the defense, finding guys, spraying the ball all over the court, running the offense. LeBron was instrumental in the second half. And then my third takeaway is going to be the defense. And I know, and just the defensive improvement that the Lakers have shown, it's now been back-to-back games with 2 of their 3 lowest outputs in terms of fast break points allowed. And I know that this is in part because of the opponent, and I'm not going to overlook that or just sort of like these have been 2 of the Sixers without Embiid and Maxey are one of the worst teams in the league, even with Paul George, who's on a minutes restriction. The Raptors are one of the worst teams in the league. So the Lakers have looked good against these 2 teams, but they also, I mean, they played the Raptors, and the Raptors torched them in transition in the previous matchup in Toronto. That's how they got back into the game. And Toronto is actually leads the league in terms of fast break points. So this was one of those matchups where it was looking rough early. They had 12 fast break points in the first half, and then LA only allowed them to get 3 in that second half. So part of that was LA taking care of the ball. Part of that was them scoring. When you are putting the ball through the basket, you're able to set your defense and get back. And we've seen a wild swing from LA in terms of when they are scoring and have a set defense, how they look defensively compared to when it's transition up and down, like what that looks like. They're often getting scored on, and they can't keep up in a track meet, at least with teams that are more athletic than them, which is frankly most teams in the NBA. So I thought the defense, and even with like the second 8, I remember AD goes down, the Lakers are down by 3 points, and that could have been a pivot moment in the game where Toronto just goes back to the kind of the energy and the flow that they were in the first half, and they just run the Lakers off the floor because frankly, like Jackson Hayes has not been a good rim protector over the start of the season. He's had a couple of nice back-to-back games against Philly and tonight, but the Lakers did not have any other center option. Christian Coloco did not dress for this game, so they couldn't bring him in. And you saw even at garbage time when they went to the garbage time unit, it was Maxwell, Max, Bronny, Gabe, and Dalton. So they didn't even have a big man out there. It was like the 6, 7, and under group. So like they didn't have a big man to throw in there for garbage time, and they didn't have a big man to back up Jackson Hayes. But Jackson Hayes, I thought, did a really good job battling Jakob Poeltl and Chris Boucher and just all their smalls who like to crash. This is a team that loves to crash and is aggressive in it and is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the league. So Jackson, I thought, was altering shots, was getting his hands dirty, and was really being effective around the rim on both sides of the ball. So I look at Jackson, I look at LeBron ramping it up. I thought Rui competed well in the second half. Cam, of course, Cam has been a game changer, a major playmaker defensively, and he continues to be their best non-AD defender. I thought Austin competed well. So Gabe had some nice moments, I will say, for as much flack as Gabe has deservedly gotten. He had a big 3 in the first quarter. He had a nice drive. I want to say it was to start the fourth, and that was to stretch the Lakers lead out. And he played some good defense. So I think I think that the defense is trending in the right direction. I do want to see what it looks like against Memphis. They're going to play San Antonio and New Orleans. Like, this is a bit of an easier stretch for the Lakers coming up, but you play the schedule. Like I always say, you play the teams in front of you. You play your schedule the way it is. And this is a bit of an easier period for LA. And maybe this is a period that can rebuild some of their defensive confidence after getting absolutely shredded for most of that 5-game road trip. So I think and I thought that they did some smart things in terms of not switching with Gabe as much. I think they've really been adaptable with their personnel and the type of schemes that they're running on that end. So I would say for me, this was they showed that it was an unserious game for 30 minutes. It was a flip the switch game against a lottery team. So that you'd like to see LA come out with more focus and take this game more seriously. But when they did, they absolutely blitzed the Raptors over the final 17 minutes. And in large part, that a lot of that had to do with their defense and the level of defense that they're playing. So I think that's a positive for me. But again, Anthony Davis's health is the most important thing from this game. And does he wear goggles? Is he available Wednesday against Memphis? Those are my questions coming out of this one. But that will do it for the takeaway portion. So let's get into the Q&A portion. I see some questions in here. See. Shabugan. Shabugan. I think I said it right? No updates on Vando and Wood. Koloko isn't ready and Hayes is facing allegations. Are there any rumors about plans to address this? I've not heard any concrete names. It's been a lot of the same stuff. Like obviously, Milwaukee is now they're on the trade market. Brook Lopez is someone they were shopping this past summer. Walker Kessler is a guy that the Lakers have had interest in that I've been aggregated on, and he's someone that's been a high asking price since the summer of 2 first-round picks, and I don't think the Lakers are willing to do that. I don't know if anyone is willing to do that. I think that's probably too much for Walker Kessler, though. As I noted on, it might have been last stream or the stream before, he has been playing at basically a walking double-double and 3 blocks and shooting around 70%. So he's been really efficient, really effective. He's young. He's 23. I think he's a short and long-term solution for a team at center potentially, but I don't think that the 2 first-round picks. I just don't see the Lakers paying that price. But I think it's certainly. So I don't know if some of you guys saw. I did Sean Davis's podcast today, and we talked about. The final question was ranking the team needs, and the 3 needs that he threw out were backup big, another wing or wing upgrade, and a 3rd star. And I continue to say that another wing, be it an upgrade over Rui. Rui has really slipped the last. I mean, I wouldn't say last few games, but it's been more than half the season at this point. Or that spot next to Austin of if you can get an upgrade over Cam and move him to the bench, or if you're moving in maybe you move Vando in for Rui and then you acquire an athletic defensive 2 that would complement Austin even better than Cam does. I would like either some position between 2 and 4 that is defensive minded, at least league average shooter, that type of player. Again, whether it's replacing Rui or replacing Cam, I think both of those spots are relatively upgradable. If that's they could be upgraded on. So that would be my that would be my priority if I'm the Lakers. I do agree though, and I also say that in part because Christian Wood should be coming back relatively soon. Jared Vanderbilt should be coming back relatively soon. If those 2 guys are out, then that does potentially change my calculus to looking more at the backup center spot. Obviously, if AD is to miss time, then that becomes an urgent situation. So I'm not. It's might be becoming more of a 1A, 1B. For me, I think it's more of a 1-2 thing, just because ultimately I think with Christian back, I think the Lakers will be able to tread water at least with that position until closer to the trade deadline when they could make more of a bigger swing. But I would say for me in the shorter term, I'm still would be looking more at the best wing that becomes available. But backup big has been an issue. It's been something I've been harping on since the summer. I didn't think that the Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood trio has been, what was going to be good enough. I think Jackson has been about at expectations. I think he's had some moments above them. He's had some moments below them. Still not a defensive minded, like rim protector type. Maybe he's becoming that. Maybe he's growing defensively. I think he has looked better. But again, I'm also factoring in the competition recently. So with Christian, he is a better rim protector statistically than Jackson. He's a better rebounder. He's a better shooter. So I would be interested to see what Christian looks like before maybe making a decision. But if it's a guy like Walker Kessler, I think that's a no-brainer. I think the Lakers do it, especially if it's like JHS and a first-round pick. You do that. But I think the Lakers are potentially going to be more active coming up here in terms of trying to find a deal over the next couple months. But really, there's so many guys that have trade restrictions through December 15th or through January 15th that the pool of potential players is much smaller than what it can become in mid-December or mid-January. And then there's also a bunch of teams that don't want to trade their guys until closer to the trade deadline. So it is a bit like there's many layers. This is not a like I know trades. It's one of the most fun things to talk about in the NBA and in sports in general, but there's so many layers to it of how teams value guys, how they value certain assets, and then their timeline of just because the Lakers might be feeling some urgency to do something sooner doesn't mean that there's going to be a team that meets that, that feels the same way. Or if they do, that the Lakers are coming from a point of desperation. And I think that's been like a lot of the past couple of years, a lot of talk of a Lakers tax. And I think that that's certainly something that exists, but I also think there's a desperation tax, so to speak, where people have known like the Lakers have been in this win now situation. And it's like anytime they're having a conversation, teams are going to ask for the absolute most and really ask them to overpay for any type of trade. And the Lakers have been reluctant and cautious to do that. So I think still I would bet on something happening probably closer to January or even the trade deadline. But certainly I think there's been, with this whole big man situation, some increased urgency from LA's part, and maybe something gets done sooner. I'm still operating on, I think it's probably January, but these things happen and the Lakers operate in silence. Think about the Dan Hurley situation. Like they have become keeping things closer to the vest more recently. So it's certainly possible, but I have not heard any concrete names yet. It's something I'm trying to track down. Okay, let's see. I got another super chat from Primo Near. Thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan. Great content as always. How do you grade JJ coaching this game, rotation schemes, etc.? I think I'd probably give him a. It's tough. I'd probably give him like I would want to rewatch the game to give you a better answer off the top of my head. I would say a B plus probably. I think that he pushed a lot of the right buttons in terms of I think that the guys who are playing well, I think he's done a general job of like he has his rotation, but then he starts to adjust within the game of like who's playing well and who's not. So I think for the most part, now, and the Lakers have so a guy like Rui hasn't really been playing well, but he kind of has to play a certain amount of time with Vando out, with Christian Wood out, and then with AD out. You just need a certain level of size out there. So I think from a rotation standpoint, he's pushed a lot of the right buttons. I don't know that I love. He's been going with Dalton and D'Lo and Austin as like that second unit group, like midway through the first quarter and third quarter, and I don't really love that lineup. I just think it's back to Austin and D'Lo together, and then you also have Dalton. And I know like that trio has actually had some success, so maybe I probably like it more if it's like LeBron and AD and not Rui and AD. But I think with Rui in there also, you have a lot of defensive targets that teams can attack. And it does seem to be more of an offensive lineup, but I don't know if it's, I mean, if you go Gabe, then you're going smaller. Like that might be a situation where you kind of just have to figure it out, or kind of go with that group until Vando's back, until Christian's back, and then you can maintain some size out there. But I haven't loved that, and I haven't loved. I think he went away from it a little bit more, but I haven't loved Gabe and D'Lo together in terms of the second unit. In terms of scheme, I think he's been doing a really good job keeping AD involved. I think going to LeBron as much as they did in the second half, and really playing the mismatch game. And I thought it was a solid performance. I would like to see, again, I'd like to rewatch it and give you a better idea. I mean, I think there was a lot of things in the first half that were frustrating, and I kind of put it more on the players than the coaching staff, because it was a lot of Pirtle just out muscling AD, or guys corner crashing, or crashing from the slot or the free throw line area, and long rebounds. And like they just have certain physical advantages over the Lakers. This is a very athletic, quick, long group, the Raptors. And you saw like RJ Barrett. I swear he had an offensive rebound. He had some tip outs. I guess maybe they credited other people, but I mean, they had, I'm looking at it now, they had 6 guys with at least 1 offensive rebound, and 4 guys with at least 2. So like this was an active rebounding group. And I thought LA eventually did a better job of collapsing on the paint and focusing more on that, rather than trying to leak out in transition. So I would say like a B plus for JJ. Again, I'd have to rewatch the game to really give you like a better answer, but off the top of my head, that's what I would say. Tamal Paul, thank you for the super chat. Not sure whether you covered this earlier. Your thoughts on the JJ walk-off episode after the Grizz game. Would you, as a journalist, approach the question differently? So I'm actually going to have Trevor on this week. Trevor's going to be on the show on Tuesday, so I'll probably bring it up with him, and we could talk through it a bit. I know he did obviously a video on Lakers Nation, but I thought it was a fair question, and I think it was more JJ sending a message to the locker room, to the team. He was really upset, and I saw it in the Phoenix post game, where like JJ comes in, he's seething, he's sitting there, and he kind of switches into like the media professional mode. But as we ask him more questions about the game, and he relives certain moments, and a lot of the questions we're asking are, why was this player struggling, or like what wasn't working in the second quarter, or like, you tried to make this adjustment and this didn't work. And like he starts to relive and replay the game in his head, and he gets upset, and it's something I think he probably has to work on. But so far, it's now led to a couple of like the Phoenix game. He dropped the mic after the first question and kind of had to look away for a couple seconds. And then the Memphis walk-off obviously went viral, and that was a big, that was just a moment that people were talking about. So I thought it was a fair question by Trevor. I think he had good intentions behind the question. Sometimes that happens. And again, I don't think it was about Trevor or the question or the way he phrased it or framed it. I think it was more so about JJ had just talked through the game and talked multiple times about the effort and the energy and the focus and the attention to detail, and how frustrating all that was for him and for the group. And then another question about that in terms of what the message was when you have a 40-year-old LeBron or 39-year-old LeBron being the guy leading the group in that sense. Like I think that just was like the final straw for JJ. But again, it wasn't Trevor's fault. I think it was just JJ again kind of being at his wit's end with the way that game played out, the way that the road trip played out. And he even, because again, then as he's walking away, he throws it out. That was the first thing I said to them. So he even like kind of answered the question. It was a short answer, of course, but he kind of even answered the question as he was walking away. I think in that moment, he kind of realized like, I'm going to give him something to go with, some type of answer from this. But I think we're probably going to have several viral moments with JJ. I asked him before the Philadelphia game if like what if he had to talk to D'Lo about that situation with the viral clip and how that conversation went. And he just said, like, I get passionate. I'm very competitive, and in the heat of the moment, like I'm going to have a reaction. And I guess they have an internal term of zombie, who are people who are non-reactive and they kind of feel like, you know, non-emotional and even in some ways non-competitive. And so he's like, I'm not a zombie, and I'm not going to ever act like that. So he's like, tonight I might have another viral reaction like that of just, I get into the game and I'm going to, you know, show my emotion. So I think that's just who JJ is as a coach. I think, you know, we've seen that with guys like Steve Kerr is one of the chillest, most laid back head coaches in the league, but he also is not afraid to go on a rampage and get a technical, get ejected, yell at his players, yell at the refs. And JJ's a bit more animated and I would say like emotional than Steve and sort of in general, but we've not seen a Steve Kerr-esque blowout or blow up yet. So I'm sure that's coming at some point. It is one thing that's interesting is I have noticed, like, because JJ was in the media and then also was a former player and a former player so recently, like he knows, like I covered him when he was with the Clippers, like he knows a lot of the media members previously. And then he also knows as a player, and he also knows them as a commentator and a podcaster. And then he also has the training and sort of like the understanding of what the media is coming at. So one thing I've noticed with him is like a lot of times he will already know the question you are asking before you finish asking it. And he's always thinking about like, what's the best way to answer this? So that's been a sort of like interesting, almost like tennis match where it's like trying to be a little bit more creative with the way you ask things and not asking the generic or general questions. But then also knowing sometimes he's just going to, like, he's finished my questions a couple times. He's always kind of ready with the, like, what he thinks is what you're looking for with the question. So that's nice. Like, I don't love the finishing questions part. I would, because sometimes you might add a caveat or something that changes the direction of the question. So in those instances, I'd prefer he just lets us finish the question. But for the most part, I would say he's been really good. He's really good with us, really good with answering questions. And again, I think he has that extra. Some coaches just answer the question very matter-of-factly or very strategically. There's certainly an element of that, but I think he's like trying to figure out, like, what are you trying to get at with this question, and how can I help give you the best answer possible without divulging something I'm not supposed to divulge. So I think he makes that calculus really quickly. And that's been something that's been nice from him coming from the media side, is like, for the most part, he gives really good answers and really detailed answers. And I've enjoyed that. It makes covering the team more interesting and more insightful. And it helps with post-game quotes, understanding certain things. So overall, it's been certainly a positive experience. I just wanted to give you some more context to how that's all gone. Question, super chat from Sir Haro. Are we giving up on Max? I'm not giving up on Max. I know a lot of people are. A lot of people already have. I would say, remember, this is a guy who's 21 years old. He had played fewer than 1,500 minutes entering this third season. I think had he been given a proper role last season, based on what we saw from the flashes that he had last season, I think he would have a lot more confidence and reps and experience entering this season. I think he'd be a different player, but you can't go back and change that. But I'm holding my Max Christie stock. The Lakers obviously see something in him to sign him to a 4-year, $32 million deal. I think 10 games in is way too early to write him off. Again, he's 2 years younger than Dalton Connect. And honestly, I don't think Dalton has been much better than Max through the first 3 games. Like even tonight, 2 for 4, hit a 3. But when you factor in the defensive gap between those two, and you take out the garbage time fourth quarter in Cleveland where Dalton just went off. Like if you look at their actual competitive minutes, their stats aren't that dissimilar, and Max has been a much better defender. Even if he's been under expectations, he's a much better defender than Dalton Connect. So now he doesn't have the same offensive value in terms of the way the Lakers use him and his floor spacing and movement and all that stuff. So I'm just saying, I think it's probably closer. Like I think Gabe, Max, and Dalton have all been pretty close in terms of relative disappointment to start the season. With Dalton, he's a rookie. So he's still like, I'm not panicking on Dalton by any means either. I'm more so just saying like, I think there needs to be a level of perspective with all this. And with Max, let's like, if this was January 3rd through January 19th, I don't think we're having the same conversation of, is it time to give up on Max? Like if he has the same 10-game stretch during that portion of the season, I think it's just also, it's more like, what's going on with Max? Why is he struggling? Why is he playing? Why is he struggling with his decision making? Why is he being hesitant? Like, I think because it's starting the season, it's the first impression, and it's soured a lot of people on him. So in the short term, I am lower on Max. Like I don't think he's going to reemerge in the rotation unless they pull Gabe Vincent out and replace him. And Gabe, I thought had a solid game, like, a better game tonight by his standards. So like, I don't see that happening next game, but it would probably have to take an injury for Max to reemerge in the rotation. But like longer term, middle to late of the season, or even next year or whatever, and even if he gets like maybe he gets traded, and maybe the Lakers are now open to moving him, I still think Max Christie is going to be a solid 3-and-D bench wing, and I will believe that until it doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, then I'm wrong. But I have not given up on Max yet. Okay, let's get back to the chat. Puppy Chow 302, Jovan, did you spend time with JJ when he was a part of the media? I did not, and I wish I did. He's someone I would, and still would love to pick his brain on with podcasting. As I was preparing to jump into YouTube and podcasting independently, he's someone that I studied and someone that I really enjoyed the work of. And it's kind of funny that he's now the coach of the team that I cover. And it's kind of this full circle moment. And then again, previously I covered him with the Clippers when I was a young reporter or just breaking in. So I've known him for a while, but we've never been particularly close. I think we've since gotten closer and had a lot more conversations since he's been the Lakers coach. But someone that from like a communication perspective, I think you've seen it with his coaching, but you also saw it with his media career. Like he's an excellent, top-notch communicator, and that's something that I think I've improved in. I've gotten good at maybe, and I hope to become great at. And he's certainly someone who I aspire to be more like in terms of at least on the media, more so the podcasting. I'm not trying to be a head coach anytime soon. Okay, a lot. The chat is always ripe with the Gabe slander. It never stops. Fang Charlie, Jovan, did you go to the South Bay Lakers game? I did. Who else aside from Quincy would you want the Lakers to give a shot to? Also, can other teams pry Quincy away from us based on the current rules of the CBA? So no to the last part, because Quincy's on a two-way. So I actually don't exactly know the full rules of the two-way, but I want to say my understanding is no, that it is a binding situation. The Lakers could give him a call. I mean, I think it might be a situation where the Lakers would have to let him out of the two-way, and probably from like a business perspective, it looks good if one of your players gets elevated to a roster spot in another team. But I think Lakers would then probably consider trying to find a way to add him to the roster. So I don't see that happening. I think if anything, it's potentially they make a move in later in the season and then create a roster opening for Quincy. Like I think Quincy deserves a shot, especially with how much Gabe has struggled. And Quincy does a lot of the same things Gabe does, but he did them at a higher level in the preseason. And granted, it was the preseason and he's a rookie and he's unproven, but I think he's worth. I felt they should have done it in the preseason just to see what it looked like with him within the rotation. Now, obviously, he's more of a wild card that you're just throwing in there, but I think he's worth a shot at some point with the weight. Like he had 28 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists in the G League game. He was the best player on the floor. He was a baller, picking up 94 feet. Like, dude is good, and I think the Lakers have something there, and I think that's something that they should develop and potentially try and play sooner than later just to see what he looks like. Like throw him out there with D'Lo and LeBron and Rui and AD, right? And just see what that looks like, or Austin and the rest of that group, like or Cam and whatever. I think Quincy deserves a shot. And as far as Quincy, the one guy, so JHS injured his leg. I don't know what happened with that. I don't know if it was a thigh, it was kind of groin or whatever. So JHS got injured. Bronny is clearly had some nice moments, but is still, I think, relatively raw and has to be in the G League and develop. And I think that's at least a year away from being a potential contributor, if not longer. And then I thought Christian Koloko had a rough game. He did not play with the same spirit and energy that he played with in the Memphis game. And I would say, I mean, the other guy that really stood out was Maxwell Lewis. Maxwell Lewis had a great game. He had 25. I thought he did a good job of playing within the confines of the offense and taking more realistic shots, and it being a lot of attacking closeouts, attacking from the weak side, trying to get to the rim, get to the free throw line. And I don't like we've seen with Maxwell sometimes in summer league and with or in garbage time, he can play with blinders on and really just look to create his own shot by any means necessary. And he actually talked about it. We spoke with him after the game, and he was like, it's one of the hardest adjustments to make is like you grow up, you always have the ball in your hands. It's kind of similar to Cam in some ways, at least from an offensive perspective of like, you're always the guy. And Cam did it at an even higher level in terms of his pedigree and whatnot. But like Maxwell was like, I grew up, I was always the guy. I always had the ball in my hands, and now I'm coming here and we got LeBron, we got AD, we got AR, and I have to play off the ball and I have to attack closeouts and I have to be a spot up shooter. And he's talked about studying Dalton Connect and Max Christie and seeing what they do in practice and trying to apply that in terms of his decision making and his shooting and his reads. So I think Maxwell Lewis would be the other guy. Right now, I think based on at least the first game and also just kind of talking to people and seeing the limited parts of practices, but like also seeing the preseason, summer league, all that stuff. I think Quincy's the one guy who I believe deserves a shot with the real team. Then Christian Koloko in a pinch. I think he needs a lot of time in the G League. And then I would say Maxwell, if he can continue that performance and continue to play like that, he's someone who I think could have a potential shot if there's a night where the Lakers have multiple injuries and like they need him as like the ninth guy. But I think he's probably further away from that than like Quincy. Slow-mo 96, Jovan, is there a chance the Lakers can get PJ Tucker? Yeah. So what? PJ's with the Clippers and they're trying to. One thing I would say with PJ is I think he might just be washed. So what? He's with the Clippers. He hasn't played yet. I know they've been trying to work something out. I would say that, because what PJ's old. PJ's 39. He's going to be 40 in May. So he's no LeBron. And I I think PJ's washed. I don't think he's looked the part of a rotation player. I mean, just from points, and I know he's never been like a big scorer, but even going back to like, I mean, like, I guess he averages career 6.6 points, but like he's been under 4 points the last 2 seasons, and shooting, he shot the 3 well, but overall has been inefficient and not shot. I mean, I think PJ a few years ago would have been a great fit on this team. I just think at this point he's cooked, to be honest. Okay. I'm going to go a few more here because I have an early morning. K Norris, thoughts on how Cam Reddish is being used lately? I think Cam has been great. Cam has been awesome. These are words I did not expect to be saying. I've repeatedly said that on here. Again, I mentioned Sean Davis's podcast. He asked me what's been the biggest surprise of the Lakers season. I said Cam Reddish becoming the player that he's been. And again, I thought tonight, like he's done it in other ways. It's not just been the defense. Like we've seen the defense before. I think he took a hit last year after he suffered with, I think he had the ankle injury, and then he got injured a couple times. And that's actually kind of one thing longer term is I just wonder, he has dealt with multiple lower extremity injuries throughout his short career so far. And I just wonder if like he can withstand the workload of an NBA season and playing as many minutes as he's playing. Cause tonight he played 29 minutes but 11 points. He hit his 3, and he talked about it at practice yesterday of just, he's like, at some point he had to accept his NBA future because he kept getting traded and his role kept changing. And it's just now with the Lakers, they want me to be a defensive stopper. So that's what I'm going to do. And that's what he's done. And he's so physically gifted. And I think tonight he took a 3 in transition that I didn't love. And he'll occasionally, it can be an adventure when he puts the ball on the floor, but I think he's primarily been making the right decisions, and you're starting to see the high school, college, early parts of the Hawks and the Knicks or the Blazers. I think those are the 3 teams he's played for. Cam Reddish come out in terms of like the athleticism and the finishing, and like he had some nice finishes tonight. He's been active in the paint, so I think Cam, like honestly, I mean Cam has been better than Rui since Cam has emerged in the rotation, and maybe the Lakers go in the direction of Cam and Vando next to Austin, LeBron, and AD. I think my concern would be you are putting your 2 worst perimeter floor spacers together in the starting lineup, and I think it's one thing to have Cam out there, to have Vando out there, but to have both of them, I think you're going to have teams ignore them and put their weakest defenders or even centers on those guys and just cheat into the paint, double AD, be there to rotate on LeBron drives, Austin drives, etc. So it might not be enough spacing or shooting, and it does change the look of the starting lineup because now you're going away from, you still have 3 really good offensive players in Austin, LeBron, and AD, but now you're trying to balance it and you're looking more of like a 2-way lineup, which has its pros, but you are like dramatically shifting, I think, the identity of that starting lineup and then subsequently the rest of the rotation. So, but I would say regardless of whether Cam, maybe he just stays in the starting lineup and Vando comes off the bench, maybe he stays with Vando or maybe he moves to the bench. But like this version of Cam that we've seen the last 4 games, granted, it has not been the best competition. It's been Detroit, Memphis, with out Bane and Smart, then Philly without their guys, and Toronto. So I do want to see what does he look like against better teams, and Lakers aren't really going to face those teams over the next week. So, but I want to see what he looks like against Phoenix. I want to see what he looks like against OKC, what he looks like against Dallas, Minnesota. Like I want to see Cam in those matchups and how those teams defend him and how they game plan for him. But so far he's been, I mean, I would say he's been the Lakers' fourth best player over this stretch behind AD, LeBron, and Austin. And that was not on my Lakers 2024-25 bingo card. Cam has been awesome. He's done all the little things. He's bought into his role. He's played within his skill set. And again, he's been really, really impressive. Kane Carter, thank you for the super chat. What's a realistic point guard Bronny can be like? I actually think a player from this game that Bronny could be like is Davion Mitchell. And you saw Davion Mitchell was not letting the Lakers bring the ball up the floor to the point that AD had to start bringing the ball up the floor. JJ talked about it after the game of Davion Mitchell was being so disruptive on the ball with Austin and D'Lo that they started having AD bring the ball up the floor and initiating the offense. And that is, I think, the type of player that Bronny can become like. Like you see the defensive potential with him. I think one thing I'd like to see a little bit more of from him is like a sense of urgency. I think sometimes he's so athletically gifted that it can feel like when he's like off the ball or even on the ball, he can kind of like there's times where he'll kind of relax and maybe get a bit upright or get out of position or whatever. Like I would like to see him locked in fully and engaged for long stretches in terms of his defense. And I think he's made progress in that regard, but I still think there's like just like a motor sense of urgency, sort of like energy that the best, like the Pat Beverly, the Davion Mitchell, the Avery Bradley, like those guys, the undersized guards who make a living on the defensive end, they bring a certain level of that. And I think we've seen it in flashes from Bronny, but I don't think we've ever seen it consistently, be it Summer League, the preseason, the regular season, or the G League. So I'd like to see, and I know Lakers are working on that with him. So I'd like to see more of that. In terms of offensively, I don't think Bronny's ever going to be a lead ball handler. I don't ever think he's going to be a like primary playmaker, but I think he can be a secondary guy. So again, I look at guys like Avery Bradley, Patrick Beverly, Davion Mitchell, with Bradley and Beverly are on the higher end of outcomes, but those guys always played well next to like Beverly was great next to James Harden because James Harden was a big playmaking shooting guard or wing, whatever, however you want to classify him. And Pat Beverly could then be the 3-and-D counterpart. Kind of like Gabe Vincent's a different, more of an offensive minded guy, but sort of along that archetype, at least when he was in Miami before he came to LA and has not played well. So Avery Bradley, though, like those are guys that can play next to, like Avery Bradley fit next to LeBron because, I mean, most people fit next to LeBron, but because LeBron is going to be the ball handler and then Avery Bradley can take the point of attack defense, but then space the floor offensively. So I think that's Bronny's path, I think, is becoming a quality spot up threat. And that could be both hitting threes and also attacking closeouts, leveraging his athleticism better in terms of his rebounding, being more of a playmaker from that regard. And then I think defensively being more active and engaged, possession to possession, and even within the possession, and really just playing like balls to the wall, super energetic, super sense of urgency, motor, like that stuff. I like that fire in your chest. Like I think he could play with a little more of that, right? And I think he's already been an effective defender without necessarily playing that way. And I think in part it's kind of his demeanor. He is a bit more of a laid back guy, and like that's just, even talking to him, like that's just how he is. So I think that's something that can be coached and developed. But I think you have to be the bar to be that. Because he's 6 foot, 6'1", to be that small and not be like an elite scorer, not be Jalen Brunson. Isaiah Thomas was obviously small, Celtics Isaiah Thomas was obviously smaller, but like if you're not going to be like that offensively, then you got to be an elite defender. And I think Bronny's been an above average to good defender at times, but he's not been a great defender. He's not been an elite defender. I think that's the next step for him. Henry Kellen, what teams do you see becoming sellers that might not be already? It's a great question. I will pull up the standings. So I think that the way to answer this would be like, which teams are overachieving that might regress back to more accurate reflection of like who they are. In the West is a gauntlet, man. I would say maybe the Clippers, but the Clippers I don't see necessarily doing a trade with the Lakers, though they have plenty. Like, I would love Terrence Mann on the Lakers. I would love Amir Coffey on the Lakers. Zubats, obviously, but the Clippers were just like, we're tearing it down because Kawhi's done for the season and this team's going nowhere. They have a lot of role players that if the Lakers could grab one or two of them, I think would really help. The Pelicans, but I don't. They have a lot of talented role players, so that. I mean, like, I would consider you're gonna have to give up a couple picks for like a Trey Murphy or a Herb Jones or someone like that. It might potentially even more, but I would certainly be interested in one of those guys if they became available. If New Orleans is just like, Zion's out, we stink, we're not making the playoffs, let's hold a fire sale. Obviously, Portland, San Antonio, Utah, I think those will be sellers at some point. Then in the East, Brooklyn at 4-6, Chicago at 4-6, Charlotte at 4-6. I think those three, like one of those will probably make the play-in. Maybe two of them will, but I think at least one of them will become a seller. Toronto, but they're at the bottom of the East. So like Washington. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the teams that we would expect to be sellers, I think have largely been bad. But in terms of like overachieving, I'd look at Brooklyn, Chicago, Charlotte, the Clippers, and the Pelicans are underachieving, but I think it's only going to get worse. So that's why I include the Pelicans. So I would say there's like probably 4 or 5 teams I'm looking at that could potentially become sellers. Okay. 2 more here. Daily meditation, Jovan. Is there any chance for Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, DFS, or Nikola Vucevic? Yes to all of those in terms of a chance. Vucevic, the one thing I would say is defensively, he's not it. And I say that as a USC guy who actually went to school with him, covered him at USC. So I'm rooting, like, if as far as I go in terms of rooting for people, like Nikola Vucevic is on that list. I and maybe next to AD that helps things, but really skilled offensively, really good rebounder. So I'm not opposed to it depending on the price. The other guys are all theoretically going to be available Cam Johnson and DFS have been available going back to last trade deadline, and DFS has been available for several years now in a row. Schroeder's always available. But it just comes down to price. I see Slow-Mo 96 trade Rui for Cam Johnson or DFS. I wouldn't trade him for DFS. I don't think. I've gone back and forth because there was times I said I would, and I feel like people were pushing back and saying that Rui's better. Cam Johnson, I'm pulling up what he's been shooting this season. He's been on a tear. He is shooting, 38% on 8 attempts per game, 63% on 2, so 47% overall, 17 a game, 4.5 rebounds, 3 assists. Yeah, Cam Johnson's been playing really, really well. I think I would do Cam Johnson I don't think I would give up a first, but if there's a way to do like a second, I'm just making sure I didn't. Okay, Kane Carter, I see I missed one of your super chats. I'll do this, then I will do one more question, then I'm wrapping. Kane Carter, you think Gabe's not being used right in Miami, who's more of a scorer than a shooter and can get in rhythm, not a spot-up guy? How much does efficiency matter? Efficiency matters. So I will say that, like, it's not the end all be all, but I think it matters. You don't want like a guy being like a 32% field goal percentage guy or like a 24% 3-point percentage guy, because then basically you got Russell Westbrook, and we've seen the impact he has had on teams negatively over the last few years. I agree with you. I think Gabe was more of a scorer and more of an on-ball rhythm guy in Miami than he's been with the Lakers. The problem is this could be, if we want to retroactively go back and criticize the Gabe signing, it was all within like a 1 week and a half span of the Lakers draft Jalen Hood-Schifino. They signed Gabe Vincent and they re-signed D'Angelo Russell. And that never really made sense. It made sense to have two of those three guys, not all three. And obviously, Jalen Hood-Schifino has not panned out, and the team has said they've not given up on him, but they did not pick up his third-year option. With D'Lo and Gabe, though, it's just there's so many mouths to feed with this team in terms of like AD and LeBron are going to have the ball a certain amount, especially with AD becoming the hub of the team and the leading scorer, leading usage guy. LeBron's going to have a certain amount. Austin's going to have a certain amount. D'Lo's going to have a certain amount. Rui's going to have it a certain amount. Even Dalton. I mean, Dalton's out there to score and to shoot. So Dalton's not just out there just to be out there. And if he's not getting shots, he's not really, like, there's certain ways he could help still, but like the optimal version of Dalton is him getting shots. So Gabe is at best like the sixth or seventh option on this team. And I think that has really affected him. And he's not been able to be the type of guy, like he's not gotten the types of shots he got in Miami. He has been used differently. He's much more of a spot up guy, much more of an off ball guy, not even really a ball handler. At times he'll bring the ball up the floor or initiate the offense, but a lot of it's like side to side. I'm taking a couple dribbles into a swing action to the other side or whatever. So certainly I think that's affected it. But I would also say I don't think Gabe Vincent's good enough to like change the offense or change the hierarchy to try and get him going. I think he has to figure it out. Maybe there's a couple of possessions a half or a game, 1.5 that you can try and be like, okay, Gabe, we're running this for you. Like, go cook, go be Miami Gabe. But he does seem to be more of a streaky rhythm guy, and him not having the ball, I think, has really affected that. So unless D'Lo's out or Austin's out and all of a sudden you need Gabe more, I just kind of feel like this is the guy he's going to be. I do think the shooting will get better, but it's probably never going to be where the Lakers or he quite want it. And that's the problem. And that's why I think it's probably best to move on from him at some point. Like, I think he's the one guy in the rotation they certainly should be looking to move if they can, but we'll see if they do. Okay. So Barath Ram, I will say I hit on that on my third takeaway, so I'm not going to answer that, but I'll do Slow-Mo 96. The last question, Jovan, do you think Rob Pelinka will make a trade? I think it's going to depend on how this team looks. And I've been saying that. Rob said the 30-game mark. Maybe they make a move sooner if they're looking really good. I think they've gotten off to a good start. You look at the 10 games they played, 6-4, feels about right. Look at the road trip. They probably should have won an extra game at least. So maybe they should be 7-3, but 6-4, 7-3 feels about where this group should be. So I would say they've met, if not exceeded, expectations overall through these first 10 games. I will be having my next episode of Buha's Block will be called State of the Lakers, where I will go through 10 storylines through the first 10 games. I will have Trevor Lane on, and we'll bounce through those storylines and kind of talk through each one of them. So be on the lookout for that. But I would say, gun to my head, yes, but it's really like it's like a 53-47 yes. I think it's going to be close because the Lakers are almost certainly going to have to give up a first-round pick to do any move of consequence. There are exceptions, so maybe they pull one off. Maybe someone's really high on JHS, but barring that, Walker Kessler, potentially the Nets guys, like Bruce Brown, like all these players are probably going to require a first-round pick, and the Lakers have really valued those picks, and it's been a high bar for them to want to include them in a trade. So I would say, like, it's got to be the right player, the right context, the right situation. But with Gabe struggling, with D'Lo moving to the bench, with Vando being out, with Rui now struggling the last week and a half, I think you can make a case those are the 4 most tradable contracts, or the 4 guys that would be most likely to be moved. Maybe you could throw Max in there once he's eligible to be traded. Like, I think the fact that those guys have all either struggled or like had a role reduction or whatever, or been out, that I think those guys are like, I don't think any one of those guys has played their way out of being traded, I'll just say. So that, I think, opens up the door to LA being open to moving 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe all of those guys in a couple of deals and restructuring the roster. So I would say really the only guys that have, like, AD and LeBron, and then Austin, they've been really high on. He's had a really good season. He's looked really good since the starting lineup change. Cam's a minimum guy. Christian's like, maybe they look to dump Christian or Jackson or whatever in like a larger trade. But for the most part, it's going to be these minimum contracts. JHS is another guy they'll look to trade, but that's, again, more of a rebuilding team that sees him. Maybe it's Utah. We'll see. But that'll do it, though, for tonight's show. I appreciate you all for rocking with me. For those listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice in the morning, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. And for those watching right now on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment under this video. I'll be back on Tuesday with a new episode of Buha's Block on the state of the Lakers, looking at 10 storylines through the first 10 games. I will also be back, of course, Wednesday night after the Grizzlies game. I will talk to you then.